Nice job. High four.
One shot, one kill. Ronnie did.
Now introducing your BudHole podcast, Scott, the Great Brandino, Gage's Rage, and Star Lamar.
What's up, girl?
I love the BudHole.
Who doesn't love the BudHole? Welcome, everybody, to the BudHole Mailbag, week number 2, sponsored by Thrive Fantasy. This week on Thrive Fantasy, they are giving away over $15,000 on this Sunday. So hit over there, sign up, use promo code BUD. They'll match your minimum deposit of $20 as high as you want to go and get in on that $15,000 that they are giving away this week at Thrive Fantasy. With that being said, welcome to the mailbag. Brandon, Gage, and Matt from Shock Fantasy are with me. How's it going, guys?
Great.
Super. Good morning.
Hello, Governor.
Hello, Governor. Well, I guess let's get into the mailbag segment, huh, boys? First question of the day comes from Brad from Bemidji. He says, there are a lot of injuries week 1 due to the lack of the preseason. Gage, we'll start with you.
I think so. These guys are coming out here on week 1 trying to perform at the top level, and if you don't have your bodies warmed up the right way, it can definitely lead to a lot of injuries. So I would agree.
Matt, what do you think?
Absolutely. You can't simulate real hitting in practice, and we needed it for the preseason. And one of the funny things, a good stat from Warren Sharp, in 2011, when there was a work stoppage before the season, and the guys really didn't get preseason, the over was hit on 73% of the games in the first 5 weeks. So you're going to see a lot of, as we call it, as Brian Johnson and I call it on Fantasy Football Weekly, point orgies. Copyright Brian Johnson there. So you're going to see, especially with the defense getting hurt. I mean, look at games like Green Bay and Detroit, where all the cornerbacks are hurt in Detroit. 3 of their top 4 corners are out today. There's going to be a ton of points scored in a lot of games this week, and you can take advantage on the fantasy side.
Brandon?
I'm right there with you. I think you can't simulate real hitting. And when they've kind of gone through a weird offseason of not having full training camp, kind of going in at the end there, and they didn't have any preseason games, so they're not taking live hits from other teams. And when you go against your own team, you're not going full bore either. So I think that definitely contributes. I do think, obviously, injuries still happen, and they can happen at a high rate. It just depends on the year and the situations. But, yeah, absolutely not having that full contact for a couple of weeks there and having a chance to try and recover from that, I think it's showing.
Yeah, I would piggyback off of your guys' takes. I think it's definitely it's part of the reason why there's so many injuries is lack of preseason, lack of live action, shortened training camps, mini camps, more so just not hitting period. You got to get the body built in before you go 100%. So I think it's definitely a real thing. Question number 2 comes from Tyler from Twitter. He says, PPR rest of the season, are you on the Jonathan Taylor train or Austin Eckler? And with this, we'll start with you, Matt.
I'm probably the biggest Eckler Bobo around right now, but you got to give it to Jonathan Taylor right now because the Colts really had it in their plan to keep Marlon Mack as a 50% part of that offense. And I just don't think Nyheim Hines is the guy who can just completely fill in. Yeah, he got a score in week 1, and that's all fine and dandy, but Jonathan Taylor is going to be their bread and butter, and he's going to end up being a bell cow. I can't say the same for Austin Eckler since the emergence of, who's the backup? Joshua Kelly. Kelly looks like he's going to kind of fill the Melvin Gordon role, and that's going to probably be a split backfield. So based on just perceived notion of who's going to get more carries, I think Jonathan Taylor is probably your better back this year.
I'm right there with you. I'm on the Taylor train. With Matt going down, Taylor is definitely going to see a higher increase. And like you said, Nyheim Hines is not the answer right now. They are going to be playing from behind, so I do think Hines is still going to have a role, but I've never quite been on the Eckler train myself. Plus, when you draft a running back in the second round, you're planning to use him He was one of the best in the league coming into this year's draft, and I really think that they're going to be trying to pound the rock with him, especially when Phillip Rivers is throwing interceptions. He's an interception machine.
I'm going to disagree with you guys here. I think Eckler is a good running back, and Joshua Kelly is taking away some opportunities at the goal line, but I think in a PPR league, I would take the receiving threat that Eckler is over the rookie John Taylor. Nyheim Hines is still the receiving option they want out of the backfield in Indianapolis. So, give me what I think to be the better running back and Eckler both ways.
I didn't fact check this, but we're going to go with it. I think Nyheim Hines was, if not the top bidded player coming out of week 1 into week 2 on fantasy waiver wires. He was definitely towards the top. A lot of people are high on him. I think he's going to have a part in that offense. And Eckler, you know what he is. He's put together a track record of being a stud, not just running the ball, but also receiving the rock. So I think if the Chargers can get that offense figured out, Eckler's going to be a great beneficiary of that. Give me Eckler for the rest of the season. Next question comes in.
Guys, it's not far off. They're going to be pretty close the rest of the year. So it's a matter of preference at this point. And the one thing I'll say, Jonathan Taylor did have ball security issues in college. And if that continues into the pros, he could definitely find himself on the bench a little bit more than he thinks. So there is a good Eckler side there. But, it's a coin flip.
I've been, I think, one of the biggest on Twitter, too, beating the drum of Jonathan Taylor. Being a Gophers fan, Jonathan Taylor had real fumbling issues in college, and the NFL does not put up with that, especially from rookies. So that would be his biggest derailer, I would say, is his fumbling issues. He has all the talent. Next question. Is Dallas Goedert more likely to be a top 10 tight end in fantasy this year or top 5 rest of the year? We'll start on this with Brandon.
Well, I mean, obviously, top 10 is more likely. He's got 5 extra spots to hit that. So I like Goddard this season. I think Ertz is obviously – he had a bad week 1. I think it was like 2 catches for 26 yards and a touchdown. I mean, it still put up points in PPR fantasy, but nonetheless, I think he's still going to be a valued part of that offense. I do think Goddard is stepping in and going to start taking over. But, yeah, obviously, top 10 is more likely.
Gage?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say he's going to be top 5 the rest of the year. I like Goddard as a player overall. I think Ertz is still on his contract year, so maybe they will be using a lot of Ertz. But, again, the injury plague has hit Philadelphia, and their top receiving threats are tight ends at this moment. But with the injury to Kittle, Darren Waller not playing as well in Las Vegas, tight end position as a whole can be very volatile, and it doesn't take a lot to be in that top 5. So if there's going to be a change, I've been beating the drum. It's going to be this year. Give me the Goddard stakes. Give me them all.
I think it helps that Kittle's out this week, and that could be a lingering injury this season. So that could easily push him out of top 5 contention this year.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good tight ends, and Goddard finished, I believe, 10th or 11th last year, and that was on the heels of a really good last 5-6 weeks of the season, where the Eagles kind of figured out that they are a passing team, and they figured out that they're a passing team in the absence of wide receivers. So I think that they figured out the high percentage throws are to their running backs and to their 2 stud tight ends. So not a knock on Zach Ertz at all. I think he's going to definitely be a fantasy viable, but Dallas Goedert's going to be up there. If I had to pick right now, I think he'd finish about 7th at the end of the season. I think that's about the range that he's going to finish in. And so I guess I'm in the top 10, but he's very close to top 5. And just because he's got another stud tight end on his roster does not mean that anybody should stray away from him in any given week.
For me, I actually picked this question specifically for Gage, just because Gage has been the primary Goddard drum beater on the BudHole podcast. So I figured I'd throw Gage a bone here and give him a chance to really double down on his take. I personally feel like Goddard is a top 10 tight end. I don't think he's going to crack the top 5, although it will, like Gage said, only take 1 or 2 injuries for him, assuming he stays healthy, to get into that top 5 range.
So, Matt, if you think that Goddard's going to finish somewhere around 7, where do you see Ertz finishing this year?
I think he still finishes ahead of Goddard just because there's so much consistency with him. He's caught like 80 balls at least in each of the past 4 years. He's Carson Wentz's security blanket, and he's targeted a lot near the goal line. So I think that just the fact that he's almost a lock for 8 touchdowns every year, I think Ertz is probably going to finish right around 5, but he could finish as high as 1 too because he's got that in him definitely.
Next question for the mailbag comes from Steve from Savage. He says, PPR League flex play today. Are you starting Paris Campbell or Deontay Johnson? With this, I'll take the reins first. I'm all in on Paris Campbell. You watched that Vikings secondary last week get just diced up like Swiss cheese, and Paris Campbell had a good week 1. Phillip Rivers loves his slot wide receivers. Deontay Johnson, I feel like there's too many mouths to feed in that offense, especially right now, to come away with any sort of solid takes. I know Deontay did finish with the most targets last week in that offense, and that's a big deal. But this week, give me Paris Campbell. Brandon?
I'm on the same train there. I do like Deontay Johnson this year, but Claypool looked good. Juju was obviously looking good. So I know they have weapons there in Pittsburgh. At the same token, the Vikings led up, 360 passing yards to Rodgers and 4 touchdowns. I know it's Aaron Rodgers, but, I mean, they still torched us there. I think that with T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell, I think both those guys are primed to have a big week. So if we're going this week right now, I'm picking Paris Campbell. However, over the season, I think I'd go Deontay Johnson.
Matt?
I'm taking Deontay Johnson. 34% of the targets last week, 34% of Pittsburgh's air yards last week. If you're building lineups on DraftKings, he's still absolutely crazy cheap. He's under 5,000. Denver's not particularly good against wide receivers right now. They lost, Chris Harris and a couple other corners from that team. And frankly, just Ben Roethlisberger is a better thrower than Phillip Rivers, and he's more apt to put the ball in the air. So with all that said, I do agree that there's good, talented wide receivers around him, but that just makes Deontay Johnson more open. So I will take Deontay Johnson this week and roll with that.
Yeah, I'm all in with you there, Matt. One thing I really liked about Deontay and the Steelers, they try and stay ahead of the curve. So if Juju has his big week last week, maybe the defense is going to key on Juju a little bit and leaves Deontay for the scores. Paris Campbell is absolutely going to go off, but I think Deontay with those targets is going to have just a better week.
I just saw Gage's big shit grin on his face when Matt went Deontay. Gage is like, I'm piggybacking right off of this. Beat the drum.
I love Deontay.
We're starting 2 out of 3. This comes from Paul from Twitter. He says, in a 0.5 point PPR league, are you going to start 2 out of 3? Kupp, Metcalf, and Emmanuel Sanders this week. We will start on this with Matt.
I'm going to leave Metcalf on the bench. Not that I don't like him there, but he does get Stephen Gilmore this week, who matches up exclusively on the outside while Tyler Lockett's a slot wide receiver. Lockett's got a much better matchup, and Metcalf could be shut down by Gilmore on the outside. So I don't think it's going to be a great week for him. 4 or 5 catches, maybe 40, 50 yards. He's still got a coin flips chance at a touchdown because he's so big and so imposing. But I think Kupp and Emmanuel Sanders, with Emmanuel Sanders getting the uptick with Michael Thomas likely out, I think that those two are a little bit safer in half-point PPR leagues as well as PPR. So
I'm going to say keep Emmanuel Sanders on your bench this week. I just don't like the offense without Michael Thomas. I feel like they're a well-oiled machine when he's in there, and without him, you're just missing the wrong parts, and I don't know if that offense will do too much today.
I'm giving you a glimpse into the future here for the studs and duds. I do have Metcalf as my dud this week. I don't think he's going to produce that well. Like you said, he's going against Stephen Gilmore. The Patriots, they still have a good defense. They're going to find a way to shut down the Seahawks. So give me Kupp and Emmanuel Sanders.
For my 2 out of 3, I am going to go with Metcalf and Sanders. I'm going to punt on Cup. I think Metcalf, yeah, he's got a tough matchup, but all it takes for him is one deep throw, and he's got a touchdown. And that in a half-point PPR, touchdowns are a little more weighted heavily. So I think starting Metcalf as the second of the two is a good go. And then Emmanuel Sanders, this is exactly why you drafted the guy, hoping that maybe Michael Thomas would either regress a little bit this year, which is a stupid hope for, or get hurt, which was more likely. Michael Thomas has been an absolute stud his entire career, and the only window of opportunity that opened up for Emmanuel Sanders to be the number one was a Michael Thomas injury, which you have. So you might as well put Sanders in your starting lineup.
It's interesting to note the variance on Emmanuel Sanders as well. He's in his past 17 games, he's had 2 games of over 100 yards, 2 games of exactly 9 yards, and 2 games that he played with exactly 0 yards. So you're going to get something weird.
Oh, Lord. Next question in the mailbag. This is from Brandon from Buffalo. He says, are any of the big-name guys who had duds in week 1 a concern of yours for the rest of the season? Main ones come to mind would be Michael Thomas, who had a bad week. Barkley had a bad week. For me personally, I think outside of injury, I'm not concerned after week 1 for any of the top drafted players. I think injuries are something that happen, and you can't you can't forecast them. They just happen. Outside of that, though, I wouldn't be concerned after week 1 and have a knee-jerk reaction to any of my studs that end up having a bad week 1. Gage, what do you think?
I mean, even Michael Thomas with the high ankle sprain, I feel like injuries do happen, but this will not be the only week we talk about MT on the injury report for the week. So if there was anyone that was worrisome, I would definitely say Michael Thomas. I mean, Barkley going up against a really good Pittsburgh team, that's just a bad week 1 matchup. I agree with you there, but Michael Thomas is my guy.
You know, to piggyback on the Barkley thing, on Fantasy Football Weekly, we really were harping on the fact that you should probably try to avoid Barkley in the first couple of weeks and trade for him a little bit later in the season, because his early season schedule obviously started with Pittsburgh last week, Chicago, then San Francisco. Then he gets to go off against Aaron Donald and the Rams, and then Dallas, which is a pretty decent run-stuffing team for the most part. They didn't look all that well against Malcolm Brown that prior week, but it stays tough for a while. Washington, who looked like a little bit better team last week, albeit against backup running backs for the Eagles, but then Philly, and then Tampa, who are both top 5 run defenses as well. So that's his first 7 weeks. You got a bye week mixed in, and then all of a sudden it gets a little bit easier. So if you're in the Saquon market right now, if you own Saquon and somebody's giving you 100% value on him right now, I'd make the deal with the thought that maybe I can go back and get him after his bye week, which is week 9 or 10, I believe. So that's a guy that I'm a little worried about just because of the matchups, just because his offensive line is absolutely brutal, and that the game scripts are going to have them behind a lot, and they're going to be chucking the ball all season.
For me, I was listening to actually that episode just the other day. So Saquon for the first handful of weeks does make me a little nervous. Michael Thomas is the same thing, but injury related is a little bit different than a healthy player going in week to week basis. I think Mike Thomas is going to be struggling with that ankle sprain for a while. And I did hear something where I think their bye week is week 7. So you could see him kind of sitting out for a handful of weeks, maybe coming in after that bye week, which obviously drops his production down fantasy wise for the season. A player I'm somewhat nervous about is Keenan Allen. That Chargers offense looked very blah last week. Tyrod Taylor and the Justin Herbert conversation, I think, is going to be happening quite a bit all season, especially if they're only putting up 16 points and against a bad Bengals team at that. So Keenan Allen is a guy that I might stray away from. If Herbert comes in, I think that he becomes a security blanket. So if they do make a change somewhere in this season, I would probably make a trade for him.
I think right now everybody's a little tepid on that Chargers offense as a whole. Being Keenan Allen, in the last since forever, Philip Rivers has been the quarterback. So Keenan Allen's been a viable option. They always put out a tight end that's a decent option as a player. But that Chargers offense with Tyrod Taylor and possibly Justin Herbert, I think everybody's a little concerned about that offense. So Keenan Allen would be a safe pick there. But, I mean, week 1 is overreaction, underreaction week, right? So let's see what happens. Next question in the mailbag. Was last week's Packers versus Vikings game more of an indication about the Packers being legit yet again, or of how far the Vikings have yet to go? And this one comes from Minnesota fans everywhere. We'll start on this with Gage.
That's a tough one. I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. I think the secondary clearly showed its flaws in being their youth and inexperience against a really good Hall of Fame level quarterback. But also, the Packers showed that even if you take a quarterback with your first pick and a backup running back with your second pick, they'll still come out there and win tough games on the road. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, not really one way or the other.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. We're in Minnesota. Guys. It's not good. I'm wearing a Viking hat. Come on. I would love, as a Viking fan, for them to realize we're paying a lot of in contract money right now to players that won't be around for a championship window. That championship window has passed for the Vikings. As you can see now, we're piecing together a secondary. We're just trying to pace things together right now, and that defense is not going to be good, and it's not going to be good all year. We lost a lot from the pass rush. We lost a lot from the secondary. We're going to be behind, and we're relying on Kirk Cousins to throw us out of it, and they don't want to rely on Kirk Cousins to throw us out of it. They want to hand the ball off to Dalvin. So, man, I just get this ominous feeling that we're looking at another 5-year downturn for the Vikings, and they're going to have to, jettison off some of these talented players and kind of build it back up again. And I hope Spielman can see it, and I hope Zimmer can see it, and they can go, all right, let's trade Anthony Barr. Let's trade Eric Kendricks. Let's trade Harrison Smith. Let's start trading guys, accumulating first-round picks, kind of do what Miami did, kind of do what Cleveland did, what Jacksonville's trying to do this year. Accumulate a whole bunch of picks in what should be a talented draft next year, and really come back and attack this thing. Maybe tank all the way for Trevor and send Kirk away.
I'm with Gage. I'm somewhere in the middle. Our defense week 1 was definitely it was not fun to watch. I do think that a small offseason, the rookies not getting as much of an opportunity to work with the team and to have the training camps and the rookie camps that they normally do on a regular basis, it definitely hurts, especially when you're going against a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. And like Matt said earlier, in 2011, the first 5 weeks, there was a lot of points put up when there was a limited offseason. So I do think that plays a little bit of a role. I don't think the Packers are as good. Their defense definitely looked fairly well last week, but I was down on them last year, and I'm not any higher on them this year. But youth definitely shows, and we're not going to get any older, besides the day-by-day basis at cornerback this year. So we're still going to be rolling with the squad that's under 25 years old, and at that, you're going to have some bad games. You're going to see some, but I do think that Zimmer's a pretty good defensive head coach. I think he's going to get something together. Whether or not that's enough to make a good playoff run, I'm not too optimistic on that, especially with his track record of pretty much every other year going from division leader to like an 8-8 team that just misses the playoffs.
I don't know. I kind of have an ominous feeling as well about the Vikings season. I just don't think – we'll start with the Packers. I think the Packers they're a borderline playoff team, as they were last year. They showed last week. They're the same team. They're going to pound the rock. Aaron Rodgers was sharp last week. Let's see him do it for the whole season. I think the Packers will be playoff contenders. Whether they get there or not, we'll see. As far as the Vikings go, they got a lot of work to do on that secondary, and they don't have a lot of experience, especially at cornerback. Safeties, they're locked down. Cornerback, It's going to be a long road. Luckily for the Vikings, though, that is what Zimmer does best. He's a cornerbacks coach. We've seen him coach up corners. They do have some talent there, but they got a long ways to go. And then if you look on the offensive side of the ball, they're banking on that offense to hold up the defense for the first however long it takes Zimmer to get the secondary figured out. And they don't have a good offensive line. As we said last week on the mailbag, the most underpaid offensive line in the NFL this year is the Vikings. They only put $18 million into the offensive line for the year. They have an injury now at guard with Elflein out, who wasn't that good to begin with. So what's his backup like? I think the Vikings, it's a big week for them this week. If they lose this week, it's definitely a sky is falling type of scenario for them on the season. They need to win this week and silence the doubters, which right now there's plenty of. With that being said, we're going to go into our studs and duds segment. I did reach out to Matt on Twitter and tell him what this is all about, but it's give us one stud, one dud from each position, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end for this week specifically. And we will start with Brandon with quarterbacks.
Quarterbacks, give me Matt Ryan. I believe last week he threw for over 400 yards. He's in one of the highest Vegas lines this week as well, if not the highest. He's got Julio Jones. I think Hayden Hurst is going to make a showing this week, and Calvin Ridley put up last week too. So I think Matt Ryan is a hell of a start. On the duds aspect of things, I'm going to go with Drew Brees this week. I think losing Mike Thomas is going to hurt quite a bit, and then I think they're going to try and pound the rock a little bit more. Use the Tay Train and Kamara. I think they're going to try and control that clock a little bit more. So I don't see an extremely high-scoring game between them and Oakland on Monday night.
I'll piggyback off you there, Brandon. I agree with your dud there of Drew Brees. It's just going to be an off week without Michael Thomas, and I do not like the offense in New Orleans without your stud being there. But for my stud of the week, I'm going from the same matchup from last week. Tom Brady coming out of a slump. He's been 0-3 in his last few games, leading back to last season. And you know how long it's been since he's lost multiple games in a row. It'll be a real tester to see if he can do it without Bill Belichick, but I think he does it this week, and Mike Evans absolutely goes off with him.
Matt?
Aaron Rodgers is going to absolutely dominate again this week. If you thought the Vikings secondary was bad, get a load of the Detroit secondary, where 3 of their 4 corners are missing this week, including Desmond Trufant and Justin Coleman. Coleman was just sent to IR. Trufant is out with a hamstring injury. And Jeff Okudah, who didn't play last week with a hamstring injury, which hamstring injuries come back every once in a while. Okudah didn't play last week. He's getting his first start, and he gets Devontae Adams. Sweet. Aaron Rodgers can throw wherever he wants today. And don't you think Aaron Rodgers has got a little bit of FU in him right now, where he's just like, I'll show you. I'll throw for 400 yards a week every week just to let you know that you drafted a first-round quarterback, idiots.
Don't light a fire under his ass. It's never
exactly that. It was all motivational. As far as bench guys, a dud, a guy I normally like to play because he's usually in negative game scripts. It's Gardner Minshew. The Titans are only allowing about 212 yards per game through the air, and the Jaguars have the lowest implied total in Vegas this week. They're slated to only score about 16.5 points. It's going to be bad for Jacksonville all around. They're doing a rotation at wide receiver, so DJ Chark was only on the field for 80% of the snaps. That's gross. Minshew got sacked on 4 of his 24 dropbacks last week, and despite winning against the Colts, it hid a lot of bad factors that were in play for Jacksonville. So I'm going to put him on the bench this week because the Titans have a formidable defense.
For me, give me my stud of the week, Dak Prescott. He's going against Atlanta in what's the top line of the week in Vegas as far as over-under. Dak Prescott last week was a little bit skittish with his new weapon, CeeDee Lamb. They lose Jarwin. I think they're going to go a 3-wide receiver, and obviously Zeke is a force in the receiving game. Plus, behind him, they have Pollard. I think Dak's due for a bounce-back game, and I think this is going to be an absolute barn-burner shootout. So give me Dak Prescott as my stud, and my dud, give me Deshaun Watson. I wasn't overly impressed with Deshaun Watson last week in that new retooled offense in Houston, and he's pulling a hell of a pull here with Baltimore. Baltimore's defense is absolutely loaded at all levels, and I think it's going to be a really tough day for Houston. So give me Deshaun Watson as my dud. Moving into running backs now, give me Ronald Jones versus Carolina as my stud of the week. Jacobs last week totaled 200 total yards and 3 touchdowns. I think Ronald Jones is going to have at least 110 rushing yards and 1 touchdown, if not more, against Carolina's defense. My dud is Devin Singletary versus Miami. I do think Buffalo is going to run on Miami, but I don't think Devin Singletary is going to be the main beneficiary of that running. I think it's going to be Zach Moss and Josh Allen. So bench Devin Singletary, which you may have been doing already. I think he's working himself into a fringe play, start-sit player. So those are my studs and duds at running back.
Yeah, I'm going to go off your Houston and Baltimore game there and pick David Johnson, who scored the first touchdown of the NFL season, as my stud of the week. I think there's going to be very little offense, but if there is a little bit of a bright spot, it's going to be going to David Johnson. A lot of dump offs, a lot of pass rush getting after Deshaun Watson, and David Johnson showed he could still catch the ball last week. For my dud of the week, I'm going to go to the Denver Broncos going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers and Melvin Gordon. Lindsey is out, so it should expand his role a little bit, but we saw them go up against Saquon Barkley last week, one of the best to do it, and absolutely dominate him. I think he had less than 10 rushing yards. So Melvin Gordon, I'm putting on the dud list.
Matt?
The best running back of the week is going to be Zeke. We saw it last week with the Atlanta defense. They gave up 2 touchdowns through the air to Chris Carson. And Carson not really known as a pass-catching back. Zeke is known as a pass-catching back a little bit more, but add in the fact that they've given up 4.3 yards per carry to opposing running backs over their last 17 games. And the fact that if Dallas gets up a little bit in this game, they're going to want to try to slow the game down, let Zeke take time off the clock, keep that time of possession going. I think Zeke is an absolute bonker stud this week. And then I mentioned my dud, Chris Carson, who I personally love, but I hate this matchup. He scored twice last week, as I said. Problem is the Patriots have had an epic run defense going for a really long time. Jordan Howard did manage to score a short touchdown against the Patriots last week, but that was the 4th rushing touchdown to a running back that they've given up in their last 21 games. So you got about a quarter chance of getting into the end zone in any given day. And when Seattle gets down near the stripe, it's not necessarily that they're handing the ball off. They use their tight ends in the end zone a lot. They got DK Metcalf as a target down by the stripe. Russell Wilson can run. So I don't think Chris Carson scores a touchdown this week. And when he's not scoring touchdowns and he's going up against a really tough run defense, I think it's probably time to moonwalk away from him.
For me, I'm going to piggyback off my dud quarterback of the week. I'm going to go with Alvin Kamara as being a stud this week. I think they're going to rely a little bit more on that run game. With Mike Thomas being out, I do see an increased target share for Alvin Kamara as well. And a fun fact, he's ended every year of his career with 81 receptions. I think that goes up this year. I think he gets up to about the 90, 95 reception targets. No, he had receptions, sorry. I do think he's going to keep at that this year as well, especially with Thomas being out for multiple weeks. My dud of the week is going to be Kenyon Drake. When you have 105 first-round picks on the defensive line, it's going to be a tough week to run against. They showed last week against Philly that they can get after the quarterback, and I think what they're going to try and do, and I don't know if I'd put my eggs in this basket, but make Kyler beat you. I think he's going to do it, but I think they're going to try and shut down that run game and make Kyler beat him through the air.
That's too many men on the field.
Well, as Vikings fans, we know how that goes.
Oh, God, that hurt.
Kill shot.
And then I'll just go right into wide receivers. I'm going to go my stud of the week. I'm going to go my homeboy, Adam Thielen. I think he had a really good week last week. He had 2 touchdowns. I know it was garbage time, but all-time counts in fantasy football. I think we're going to be playing in a little bit of a tighter matchup, and I do think that Cousins is going to have to throw. He's the bona fide number 1 here. I did there was a little bit of Justin Jefferson last week, but Adam Thielen is going to get a majority of the targets this week. And then I mentioned it earlier, DK Metcalf is my dud of the week. Going up against Patriots, Metcalf is pulling Stephen Gilmore. He had a pretty good week last week, but I don't really trust people going against the Patriots. Belichick is a hell of a coach. I think he's going to find a way to shut him down. So I think they're going to try and make it a Chris Carson game to win that for the Seahawks.
For my stud of the week, I'm going to go over to the Pittsburgh matchup and a guy we talked about earlier, Deontay Johnson. I think he showed with the 10 targets that he is the number 1 option. And Juju did excel with the number 1 option being out there, but I think the NFL, you got to stay ahead of the curve, and Pittsburgh's going to do that and look for Deontay to score a touchdown this week, combined with the 10-plus targets. For my dud of the week, I'm going to go with Amari Cooper in Dallas. It's not so much that I don't like the game this week. I think they're going to absolutely pound the rock with Zeke. And then for me, it's just the receiving options they have behind him. Gallup and the rookie Lamb definitely are going to take away from it, and I just don't know who's going to get it. I don't think it's going to be Cooper, though.
That's a bold call on Amari Cooper.
That's what I do.
Dude had more targets than Gallup and Lamb combined last week. That's a bold call, Cotton. Let's see how this one pans out. Devontae Adams is obviously my top wide receiver of the week, but I wanted to highlight another guy who I think if you're in a fantasy league and you need a wide receiver because there's been a ton of injuries this week, let's talk about Brashad Perriman of the Jets. Jamison Crowder had 13 targets, 7 receptions, 115 yards, and a score last week. He's out this week. So is Le'Veon Bell. So is half of the rest of that team. They're facing the Niners. The Niners give up around 12 catches, 130 yards, and a touchdown per game to the wide receiver position. And Brashad Perriman is the only wide receiver worth a damn on that roster. They have Chris Hogan and Braxton Berrios as the other guys running alongside him. Brashad Perriman is looking like a guy who can really just go off. And he goes off like 3-4 times a year. This is one of those games where everything aligns. And I think that you're looking at a good Brashad Perriman game. As far as guys that I don't want to play, I highlighted DK Metcalf a little bit before. I think that there's always a chance for a score for DK. But I'm just nervous about the matchup with one of the best cover corners in the league in Stephen Gilmore. And it's probably somebody I just don't want to use this week. I'm kind of harping on Seattle, I'm seeing. But I really like a lot of the other players in that game.
For you, you're thinking Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett just go for probably 250 and 2 together. And then Russell Wilson does whatever else he does. For me, my stud is Devontae Adams this week. Look what he did last week, and he's pulling just as good a matchup with an angry Aaron Rodgers. Give me Devontae Adams as my stud this week. And then as my dud, give me DJ Chark. I think it's going to be tough for Jacksonville. He wasn't great last week. A lot of people are going to be starting Chark because of where they drafted him. Be very wary of him, especially in that matchup. I think he ends up on the dud list this week at wide receiver. Moving on to tight end now for this week. My stud, give me Hayden Hurst. I picked Hayden Hurst as a stud last week and got burnt by it, but he did have targets. And he also played, I don't remember the exact number, but he played a large percentage of the snaps and ran routes in the route tree. So give me Hayden Hurst as a stud. Again, this week I'm doubling down on it and what I think is going to be a shootout of a matchup. And for my dud, give me Evan Ingram. I just don't think he's efficient. And Judge clearly doesn't care that he's not efficient. He's going to keep going to him. And you drafted Evan Ingram fairly high. You're probably starting him again this week. He's going to cost you in week 2, just like he costed you in week 1. Evan Ingram is a dud.
Matt?
Mark Andrews. Mark Ingram. He's not a tight end. Mark Andrews is the studliest of all studs this week. I'm using him in a ton of DFS lineups. His price is a little bit lower than Travis Kelce, and he is the number one target in the red zone for Lamar Jackson. And the subtraction of Hayden Hurst actually helped Mark Andrews, I think, quite a bit. And he led all tight ends in touchdowns last year. He's going to lead all tight ends in touchdowns this year. I think that he's clearly the guy who finishes the season as the top tight end in the league. And I don't think it's going to be particularly close here, especially with Kittle nursing a knee injury for a while. So I'm definitely keeping my eye on Mark Andrews. And for a tight end I don't like, TJ Hawkinson, let's say. Even though the game script should be in the Lions' favor to pass, he only had 5 targets last week. That's pretty disappointing in the absence of Kenny Golladay. A lot of the targets went the way of Quintez Cephas, who was from the University of Wisconsin. He got 10 targets last week. And the Packers don't allow a ton to the tight end, as we saw last week with the Vikings. Pretty good linebackers and safeties that move into coverage there. So while I like TJ Hawkinson as a player, and he did score last week, I'm probably not in on him for this week.
Well, I'll go next because my stud of the week was TJ Hawkinson. I do
yes.
from
Feet to the
behind.
fire.
They're going to be passing quite a bit this week. With Kenny Golladay out, Hawkinson is going to see, he's going to see a target share. He had 5 receptions for, I can pull it up, 56 yards and a score. I see him breaking the 100-yard mark this week. He was top 5 tight end last week in full point PPR. I think he's going to break top 3 this week. Going into my duds is Tyler Higbee. I think he finished as tight end 22 last week. That was supposed to be a high-scoring matchup between the Cowboys and the Rams. I'm not a big Higbee fan. I think that they're going to try and pound the rock this week, along with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. They're going to see quite a few targets. So I'm going to keep Tyler Higbee on my bench.
For my stud of the week at tight end, I am going to shoot for the stars with probably the best option available, Travis Kelce. I just like Kansas City's offense, and any chance you can take a piece of it, give me all of it. For my dud of the week, I'm also going to piggyback off Matt Harrison here and take Mark Andrews. I think if they use Mark Ingram a little bit more and run the ball, I don't think you'll see Lamar throwing for 4 touchdowns again this week. And I expect a little bit of less passing work and a little bit more running work from the stud Ingram.
Just the contrarian.
Securing Mark Andrews in my lineup now.
Submit and close laptop.
A little hit percent there. It's probably going down.
Alrighty, Matt. Floor is yours. Give some shout outs to what you got going on.
Give your tight ends already?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. I got too excited about the Mark Andrews.
Come on, let's go.
Do some tight ending. Good Lord. Quit trying to wrap this up so fast. We're having too much fun. I did give mine. Hayden Hurst and Evan Ingram.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
It was just quick hitter, not long-winded. So it kind of, you weren't listening too close. It just kind of went by the wayside. But remember Hayden Hurst, everybody. It's a real stud. Just because it was fast doesn't mean it's not a good pick.
Fast and efficient.
Fast and efficient. That's right. Matt, take the floor as far as what you got going on. Give some shout-outs to Shock Fantasy. Here you go.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me on. I launched Shock Fantasy a little over a month ago. One of the things that I've been doing for a long time is my Dynasty Trade Value Chart, which people find a lot of value in. And after I left the full-time fantasy gig, I ended up continuing to do that and just selling them piece by piece on Etsy. And then, people were like, you know what, I'd like to subscribe to a season pass of these. So I created a website, and I have a season pass option. And you can get Dynasty Trade Value Charts. I have Best Ball, some DFS stuff. A lot of the stats that I'm spouting off today came from my Super Dash, which I use each week to prep for my Fantasy Football Weekly radio show. So, the Shock Fantasy's been going great, and I'm going to set up a coupon code for the BudHole watchers and listeners, and we'll just make that coupon code BudHole because, of course. And you guys can get a year of Shock Fantasy for $25. That's 6.9 cents per day. We thought that one out really well. Nice.
That's perfect.
Right? And I'll even kick back a couple of bucks to the BudHole guys if you use their promo code to sign up. So because I like to try to keep other small sites such as yourself rolling and going in business. So we're gonna get that set up, and if you want to join Shock Fantasy and see all of the cool dashboards and cheat sheets and all the stuff that we have over there, $25 for the whole year, 365 days, and we're looking to add some other sports along the way. So we should have some more cool things going as we get into late winter and the spring.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. I will say I've used your value chart for as long as I've been doing a dynasty league, and I've been we're all in a dynasty league together, and I think we've been in it for now. This is year number 6, so it's a great value. It's worth the money on top of everything else that you have over at Shock Fantasy. It's definitely worth the buy. Thank you very much for that, Matt.
Thank you.
With that being said, make sure to follow us on Facebook at BudHole, Twitter at Official BudHole, subscribe on YouTube so you get live push notifications when we go live on Sunday mornings with the mailbag at Official BudHole, TikTok Official BudHole, get in on that before it's banned in the United States, Instagram Official BudHole. Check us out on all the social media platforms, and thank you, Matt, for joining the BudHole today. And everybody remember, it's important to spread BudHole.
Bye.